Welcome to H&MV ESG Podcast. The E is for environmental, the S is for social, and the G is for governance. Each week we'll dive into one of the three pillars. I'm Sinead.
And I'm Kate.
Welcome to episode 7, Governance.
Welcome back to episode 7. Today it's all about governance. And today we're delighted to have Alan.
My name is Alan Owens. I'm head of legal at H&MV, and my background is as a lawyer, as a solicitor.
Very good. So let's dive in. Alan, what do you think ESG is?
So my understanding of ESG is it's how we measure the non-financial performance of a company. So it's whereas we're used to looking at numbers and turnover and all of that, this kind of is how we report on the impact a company has on the environment and society as a whole. So there's probably, it's a relatively new term and a relatively new way of doing things, but there are kind of, I suppose, risks and opportunities for any company tying in the different elements, the environmental, the social and the governance side of it.
Yeah, very good. So the opportunities and risks, what do you think they are actually, now that you mentioned it?
Well, the big risk is, I suppose, the greenwashing side of that, and being caught out in the greenwashing or being behind the curve and not doing anything. But like, I suppose the example that always comes to mind in terms of the risks of greenwashing would be that Volkswagen emissions scandal a few years ago, where they they were doing their testing, and it was when the steering wheel wasn't moving and locked, so it underreported. It underreported the emissions, and the big risk there is that I think immediately when it came out, the stock price dropped by 20%. So that was billions and billions wiped off of the value of the company, because they were saying they were doing something that they weren't actually delivering on. So that's a big risk.
Yeah, massive. And the opportunities?
The opportunities are, like, if you are a real company, a company that is really focused on the environment, sustainability, and you get out ahead of it, there's a lot of value to be had from that, because there is, I suppose, clients and investors that are passionate about it, want to get involved in that space or support that space. So, and are probably even willing to say, for, we're in a service industry, pay more for the service because of what you're delivering. Absolutely. So if it is like really embedded in the culture and you're doing what you say you're going to do, and you practice what you preach, there are a lot of opportunities to be a leader in the ESG sphere.
Absolutely. It's everything, to be honest. You could cover ESG under everything.
And then even in the financial space, like, it's probably taken over the financial space in a massive way. Like, ESG investing, like, seems to be to the forefront of an awful lot of the development of countries even, and companies who are developing at the moment.
Yeah. Well, you have like a lot of, say, pension funds and all of that are investing even into the projects we're working on. Yeah. And their key criteria is, ESG is their, front and center in what they want to do. So it's a big thing. So there are loads of opportunities there.
That's amazing. For like a few years ago, nobody probably knew what it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So governance is how we police ourselves. Yeah. So on a day-to-day, what does that mean to an employee?
I suppose it's of the ESG, governance is probably the least focused in on, but in terms of building an ESG culture, you probably start with the governance part of it. And governance is about, you can have all your initiatives, you can have, you can talk about ESG and talk about being sustainable, but it doesn't really mean a lot unless you have the policies and the procedures behind it.
Very true.
And that the decision-making process is methodical and backed up. So I suppose that's what I see the governance is that it's how we make the decisions and how we back up the decisions we're made. And like, you can, from the social part of it, if you're looking at, I suppose, even just the employees want to know that all these decisions that impact them are made fairly and transparently, and that there are processes in place. So it's really about putting the structures in place that good decisions are made, and that you have the right people involved in making those decisions that can actually deliver them. So like, going back to the greenwashing thing, you can be setting objectives 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead, but you need somebody who's actually invested in it, who will kind of
Tracking those KPIs along, yeah.
yeah, and targeting the kind of steps you need to get there. So I suppose that's how I would see governance as being. You have the reporting part of it, that there will be reporting coming down the line. But it's all about, I suppose, making sure that the right people are empowered to make the decisions and that they're held accountable for the goals that we put in place.
That's all written down.
Yeah.
It's all written down, yeah.
And even on the greenwashing things with like offsetting and insetting, I don't know, what would your kind of views be on that at the moment?
Yeah. I suppose it's like, it probably starts from like H&MV want to be a company that has a culture of being sustainable, from the environmental side, and offsetting, I suppose, is there's a lot of good and bad.
It's kind of a bit grey at the moment, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's kind of, I suppose it's not something I have spent too much time kind of digging into itself, but I suppose if you're going to be a leader, you need to be at the forefront of it, and actually taking actions that have clear, tangible benefits.
And making them probably local as well,
Yeah. So, and if you can, and having the buy-in, across the company and with all the stakeholders as well. So that's probably one that people need to get their heads around at a senior leadership level of what will make the most impact. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you talk about the reporting side of it. So the reporting, and there's a lot about CSRD at the moment. Can you explain to us very high level now? Very high level, if you don't mind.
All the criteria.
All the criteria and what that means.
Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So this is coming from the EU level. So it's, I think, like you were saying, Kate, it started off as very much a financial institutions reporting. So that was its first iteration a few years ago. So you've got your investment funds are already doing some level of reporting on it. And as is with the EU a lot, the net kind of gradually gets widened as it goes along. So from 2024, it captures non-financial companies and private companies where H&MV are at the moment. So it's what it is, in essence, is like there's a lot of stuff out there about it, but it's setting these key measurable and comparable criteria that every company needs to report on. So 2025 is the start of the reporting. I think some companies will be 2026, but it'll be really the 2024 year is when companies need to start capturing this, reporting on it, and then it's up there and it's comparable against other similar companies, and it'll be comparable year on year. So it's really kind of getting companies thinking about it and complying through public scrutiny to really.
So where do we start?
So I suppose reporting is a lot easier when it's actually something that's embedded in what the company does, and I suppose this is what we're trying to do at the moment. It's trying to get ESG principles embedded in the day-to-day of the company, and if that's the starting point, the reporting part gets a lot easier. If you were scrambling to pull together,
such a large amount of data as well to even kind of get your head around as to, because it's everything.
It's everything.
Yeah,
it is everything. The environmental stuff is probably slightly easier because it's a little bit more tangible. But
in terms of the figures, maybe.
The social and the governance. Like, how do you report on governance apart from putting a list of policies?
I know that there is the criteria. I did look at the reporting heads, and it's one head for governance.
It's one head,
But governance does affect all the other areas as well.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That's the point in it. So where you start, it's probably actually taking concrete actions, and then it's easier to report on them. So that's how I would see it anyway. And I suppose we've been talking about, like, in H&MV the last while, like the H&MV culture, and it probably starts as like the culture feeds into it as well. So like I suppose the H&MV culture, as I'd see it, is one of kind of openness and fairness. And definitely the S part of ESG would, that H&MV prides itself as being fair to its employees, not even just its employees, but everybody in the supply chain. And if you start from, it's nearly trying to spread our culture out to our entire supply chain, and if everybody treats each other fairly and nobody's, trying to get one up on one another, all of that S part, and I suppose the governance as well, you know, like the supply chain, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, all of that. So
Okay, so we have a lot of work
that
done.
to feed through into it. So that's the hope anyway. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so how do we go about engaging our employees and stakeholders on the topic of everything governance, really?
It's probably like educating or getting it out there that governance is a key part of all of this. And like from an employee perspective, what you want to know from a governance perspective is that everybody is treated fairly, everything is done transparently, that, you know, if something is being looked at from a policy perspective, it's considered, it's thought out, it's not just what somebody had for breakfast in a given morning and how they feel
Implemented.
yeah. And then once the policies and procedures are in place, the people are held accountable. You know, accountable, like it can be negative. Some people can have negative connotations, but it's people taking ownership of their policies, their procedures, their initiatives, and driving them on, which I suppose is what
It's fair and
H&MV
transparent,
also-
really.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Very good. Well, that's it for us. Thank you very much, Alan.
Great. Thanks a million.